All right, we're good to go. Welcome to Utah Stories, my friends. So today I just wanted to let the cat out of the bag regarding corruption in Utah. It's just not really talked about much. I haven't really talked about the LDS Church being fined $5 million by the SEC. I wanted to go into LDS member corruption and what I call the good old boys club. I've been calling it that for probably 15 years. That was a phrase I think I read in an op-ed once, and it sounds like very accurate. It's a good old boys network of LDS members. They're all slapping each other on the back, doing land deals, starting MLM companies, multi-level marketing companies. They collude and they crony up to try to monopolize real estate deals, shopping areas, shopping districts in towns. And it's about time somebody just call them out. So that's what I'm going to do in today's episode. I appreciate you joining me. Our brand new issue of Utah Stories magazine has come out, and it's really along these lines. It's called Utah's Identity Crisis. And this is a illustration by the great Chris Bodley. You can see in the picture, this guy's drawing himself as a magnificent, beautiful man, but really he's not so great looking. And that's kind of how I look at what's going on with the political leaders in Utah. They think they're doing an awesome job. They think they're so wonderful, and they look great. But really what they're doing is backroom, dirty deals. They're doing what I've kind of heard termed honest graft, where it's not blatant corruption and that they're not doing big payouts of illegal money. In the case of the church itself, they weren't involved in money laundering. They were misreporting to the SEC. And then about in 2019, if you know a little bit of the history, Ensign Investment Group, which is it's a wealth management company managed by the LDS Church with all of their wealth. A guy by the name of David Nelson came out and said, as a whistleblower, the church has $100 billion in accounts, and they're not reporting it all. And what we've covered this story now for about 3 years. So one of the huntsman's brother, younger brother, I believe his name is not John, but maybe his name is. See, there's John, Paul, and a younger brother, but he basically wanted all his tithing money given back to him, and he sued the LDS Church for back tithing because he gave it under false pretenses. He was giving it them under the belief that money would be used towards helping the poor, helping the rescue operations around the world, humanitarian aid, and then he found out that tithing money is indirectly being used to build the giant Mormon Mall, the giant City Creek Center in downtown Salt Lake City, and that Zion Securities, the for-profit arm of the LDS Church, was basically raking in billions of dollars. And when the whistleblower came out, he said they have $100 billion in accounts of stocks and that's basically just their stock portfolio. And then we've calculated with all of the land holdings the church has around the world, it's close to $1 trillion of land. And the question is, and we're posing this question for our next issue of Utah Stories magazine, is what would Jesus do with $100 billion? I think it's a really fair question to ask. What would Jesus engage in if he had $100 billion? Would he be building 200 temples? Would he be stuffing it away in a NASDAQ and the stock market? Would he be enriching the members of the hierarchy of the LDS Church, or would he be giving that money to the poor? So that article is going to be coming out. But I'm going to read to you the beginning, the introduction to our current issue, so you can get a sense of what we write about. So the LDS Church was recently fined $5 million by the SEC for hiding billions of dollars. Perhaps giving unto Caesar what is Caesar's doesn't always apply in the world's second wealthiest church. Utah political leader corruption among LDS members, including former Department of Agriculture Chief Kerry Gibson, is nothing new. Gibson was let go for corruption and collusion after enriching himself with taxpayer money at the rollout of legal medical cannabis bonanza in Utah. he had a PR company that was receiving fees to those who really wanted those coveted licenses, which turned out to be worth many millions of dollars if you were able to get one of the grower licenses. But Gibson is not alone. Influence peddlers that we've reported on, like David Robinson, who is suing every single media outlet, including this one, for reporting on how he allegedly sexually harassed several women. And that went on for years under the Republican Good Old Boys Club in the county. So this Good Old Boys network is Utah's Tammany Hall, where LDS billionaires dream up harebrained schemes like a gondola that would decimate the environment in one of Utah's few remaining natural wonders, Little Cottonwood Canyon. Spearheading this plan are men who are at the top of the Good Old Boys Club. They include Chris McCandless and Wayne Niederhauser of CW Management. So we've been talking to these guys, and I just actually talked to Chris McCandless on the phone. I was happy to get a hold of him. I'm not going to assume that he has bad intentions with his gondola proposal. I'm not going to assume that, but it is a harebrained scheme because it requires 22 200-foot towers, the base of which will be 30 feet wide, and thousands and thousands of tons of concrete will need to be poured through the middle of this just amazing natural wonder we have here. It's really the canyon that accesses the greatest snow on Earth. Now, if you know Utah, you know its geography. There's good snow all over Utah. But the steepest and the deepest snow is accessed at Alta and Snowbird. That is really the best snow on Earth. And they want to take that canyon and turn it into a place to just insert a massive gondola, the biggest gondola ever built on Earth. They want to put up the most beautiful canyon on Earth. And I just asked Chris, I was like, dude, you wouldn't build a gondola to Delicate Arch, would you? Would you think that would be a good idea? What about a gondola to the base camp of Mount Everest? Do you think that would be a good idea too? There's a lot of traffic at the base camp of Mount Everest. And he goes, that's not what we're talking about. It's either we build a 4-lane bus highway up the canyon, or we build this gondola. It's got to be one or the other. And I'm like, why does it have to be one or the other? It's like, that's like saying, oh, there's so many people going up to Delicate Arch. We need to build a massive freeway right to Delicate Arch and have parking all around the arch. No, you don't. You just limit the number of people that are there. And I went skiing with my kid a few weeks ago up at Snowbird. There's already too many people on the mountain. This is just another greedy scam. And the developers and UDOT want to make you believe we have to accommodate all this traffic. We just need to let more people up there. No, we don't. And then Chris goes, okay, so are you going to tell your kids they can't go skiing anymore? Are you going to be the one telling that? I was like, no. Well, if we want to go skiing, we'll go skiing on Monday or Tuesday. But I just won't go on Saturdays. And he's like, well, wait and see. It's going to be $400 lift prices. And I'm like, I don't see skiing as being a sport anymore for working class people or even middle class people. It's a sport now for the elite. It's like $200 for a lift ticket to go up to Snowbird now. I'd rather go to Mill Creek and go backcountry hiking and go maybe skiing a couple of times or 3 or 4 times. I don't think that in the interest of, making skiing accessible to everybody, that is a legitimate concern. But we're going to keep talking about it. And I think McCandless might actually come on the podcast. I was really happy he talked to me for about 25 minutes today. But he is really the good old boy of the good old boys. Him and Wayne Niederhauser. Wayne Niederhauser already said he's not interested in talking about homeless affairs. And that's why I'm ranting today. I'm ranting because over the last few weeks, you might have noticed, we have not had any homeless leader advocates on this program. And it's not because we aren't trying. We are reaching out to all the top homeless organizations to have their leadership come on this program to talk about homeless problems and to address the concerns of actual homeless people. So I've conducted dozens of interviews with homeless people on the streets. A lot of these interviews nobody's ever seen because I want to roll them out new when we have these homeless advocates the leaders of these homeless organizations come on the program to talk about it. The problem is they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to come on the program. Wayne Niederhauser told us, no, I'm not interested in coming on Utah Stories. But you know who said yes? Carol Hollowell of Switchpoint, who's got an innovative new model for how to run a homeless shelter effectively that offers dignity, that offers less security, that offers more ownership over and tenant rights than what the road home offers and the Volunteers of America. We've had on Gene Hill of Catholic Community Diocese, who runs St. Vincent's Dining Hall and the Weigland Center. We've had on Wade Bailey, who runs Crossroads Urban Center, Rocky Anderson. We've had on tons of homeless advocates, but they're, I believe, like Ty Bellamy said, certain reporters and media outlets have been blacklisted by Mayor Mendenhall, where they basically are saying, you are not allowed to talk to these people. You just can't go there. And that's because we have a completely failed homeless system in this state. It's an absolute failure. There's homeless people dying on the streets. There's a complete absence of real compassion, and nobody wants to acknowledge it, report on it. I talked to Rocky Anderson today, and I talked to him 2 weeks ago. The problem is the media is not reporting on it because this is a problem of mostly the liberal establishment in Salt Lake City. These groups are run by far left-leaning organizations where it's a really strange type of thing, because you would call it liberal libertarianism, in that you're deciding that the government is going to offer all the solutions, but at the same time you're going to allow some degree of people just smoking up crack on the sidewalks, people just victimizing homeless individuals on the sidewalks, and you're not going to prosecute that to the extent that we ever have. And then the government-run housing organizations are there to solve the problem for these cities. And it's not just Salt Lake City, it's cities all over the western United States. And we know it's getting only worse in Los Angeles. San Francisco is absolutely, completely being decimated with crime right now. They're calling in, the mayor there is now calling in for federal assistance because crime is running rampant, because the district attorney's office doesn't want to prosecute people who are committing what they want to call petty crimes. Anybody caught shoplifting, you're not going to go to jail. You're as long as you shoplift less than $1,000, they're not even going to give you any jail time at all. They're just going to say, "Oh, don't do that again, please." And so San Francisco is really, really tumbling out of control right now. And that's due to far left-leaning administrators who run both the mayor's office and the homeless administration policies, which just basically throw personal accountability out the window and say, you can stay drug addicted. We're going to call your drug addiction a disability, and then you can collect Social Security disability. Then you can apply part of that check to your permanent supportive housing, all if you decide to just remain a drug addict, remain out on the streets, don't get help, don't get the care you need, and don't try to progress as an individual. And it's really sad. I mean, I've been studying this now for 16 months, and that's really what I concluded after I talked to Paul Webster on the program, who worked for the Housing and Urban Development Department under Ben Carson. And that's the reality. That's, if you want federal money, you got to call homelessness and addiction a disability, which enables you to qualify for Social Security disability, which enables you to get free housing. And I've pointed out before, there are now two ladders. One ladder going down where you're rewarded all the way down. As long as you keep failing in life, you're rewarded with more handouts by the government, more housing support, more food stamps, more everything. It's as opposed to the free market meritocracy ladder, which goes up for your hard work, your merit, your accomplishments. And so with that, we're starting a new segment to this program, which is pointing out people who have made businesses in Utah. And it's going to be success stories of people who, a lot of these people started with nothing, and they came to America, or they had the right mental framework to start businesses and to really achieve greatness. And so I want to use this program as not only just pointing out what's going on in homelessness and housing, but also point out exceptional success stories of people who really achieved a lot with almost nothing. And so today on the program, later on, we're having on the program Dolly from Dolly Crepes, and he is actually an immigrant from Serbia. He came to Salt Lake City, I believe it was about 18 years ago, with literally almost nothing. He had a suitcase and he had a dream, and he wanted to work in the food industry. He has a really culinary mindset for creating amazing food. He's going to come on and tell us how he built this beautiful, awesome business called Dolly Crepes, and it's just exploding now. It's growing by leaps and bounds, and I'm really excited to have him on a little bit later on. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is how in Utah, why we should pay attention to this, why any of you who are watching are wondering, I just don't want to hear any more news about homelessness and housing. It's just so discouraging when you hear what's going on. Why should we care? And I think what it really comes down to is Utah has the hottest economy in the nation. We are becoming, I believe, a leader in the Western United States for how to build a city. And I think that what we've witnessed in the past, I'm listening to a really interesting book right now on tape called The Power Broker. It's about a guy named Robert Moses, who was in New York City at the turn of the century. If you look at New York City in the early 20s through the 1950s, the enormous transition that city had to undergo as it doubled and tripled, quadrupled in size. I think what's going to happen in Salt Lake City and Utah in the next 20, 30 years is very similar to what happened in New York City in the 20s through the 50s. And so I'm listening to this book on tape about Robert Moses, and what I've learned so far is that they allowed the free market to solve all the housing problems initially. And what you had initially was a lot of slums, a lot of tenement housing. And what tenement housing was landlords putting up structures that could house 10 people in a small apartment, and there were no limitations on housing at all. And so the sanitary conditions became terrible. The living conditions became terrible. It was extremely cheap rent. There were no homeless people back then. That wasn't even a term, but there were slums all over the place. And so what Moses decided needed to be done, especially when the automobile came about in the 1920s, was he said the poor working class people really need to have a place where they can go. And he became the favorite non-elected leader in New York government because he opened up this area called Jones Beach, which was off of Long Island, to the poor working class people of New York who really had nowhere to go do a picnic or enjoy an afternoon on the beach. There were no accessible beaches to the poor immigrant families back then. And he just said, this whole massive expanse of land off Long Island, I want to open it up to the working class. I want it to be a place where people can go of all socioeconomic areas. And so he became this beloved sort of bureaucrat. And from the 1920s to about the 1940s, Robert Moses built giant public work project after public work project. He built bridges and tunnels and freeways and bypasses roads, and he basically became the major power broker, even much more of a power broker than the mayor at that time, for building more roads so more places could be more accessible to more people. And the problem became that eventually his little network of civil servants and himself became more powerful than the governor or the mayor of New York City. He was able to greenlight projects and say who was going to get what projects built, what companies were going to build what projects outside of the purview of the mayor and the governor. And so what ended up happening was Moses was just became single-minded, that he didn't need to hear the will of the people any longer. If he wanted a giant bypass road going right through a slum area, he just would say, this is where my ruler goes, and I don't care about anything else. This is where my road's going. And so at the end of his reign of power, he was basically just knocking out all of the slums, all of the affordable housing in New York, which led to the template where the government could declare eminent domain, which means they could just take somebody's private property anytime they feel like it for any reason they wanted and give it to another developer who wanted to build something that was nicer than what was there previously. And that created a template for how you build a city in America. Everybody who's a planning person, I'm sure, knows the name Robert Moses, and that is really what we've done all over the United States, in especially our city areas. And so I think that's a good lesson to follow, because that's exactly what we don't want to do. We don't want to say, okay, we're going to favor this new Silicon Slopes area where the prison used to be. We're going to fast track all these projects for high-rise condominiums and high-end housing, and then just completely neglect what the working class people actually need. And so that's the template I feel like we're following. It's a road I don't think we want to go down. And the only way I feel that is going to be a check against the powers, the good old boys club that exists in Utah, is by presenting the voices of local Utah, presenting the voices of the working class people, the homeless, the entrepreneurs, the people who are out there who are creating our economy, especially at the grassroots level. And that's what we want to do here at Utah Stories. I was just talking to Rocky how the Tribune is not covering the corruption that's going on and the just complete disregard for human life that's happening in the mayor's office. And it's really sad that they won't cover it because it's such a big story. And I just said, we're just going to keep doing it. We're going to keep having people on the program. We're going to keep funding investigations. We're going to keep talking to business owners and all sorts of people about what's really going on, presenting the voice of local Utah. So with that, we're going to have Dali on the program in about 10 minutes here. And if you'd like to be a bigger part of Utah Stories, go out to utahstories.com, subscribe to our free digital newsletter, or I would highly encourage you to subscribe to the print magazine. We would love to send this right to your door anywhere in the United States. That includes every single state in the continental United States. We'll send it to your house for $3 a month. You can read about everything that's happening in Utah. This is a really awesome issue. We've got a story. We got stories about families that have had lots of kids and more families that are choosing not to have kids. And then we're looking at artists in this issue. I wrote a story, or Arvid actually wrote a story about a visit to Mars. There's actually a Mars space station out in the middle of the desert in Hanksville, Utah. I encourage you to go check that out. It's actually there. You can go visit Mars out in the middle of the Utah desert. And in fact, we'll tell you how to get there if you read the issue. And then the question, can Moab become a year-round town? That's that's an article I wrote where I interviewed this awesome couple who relocated to Moab from Salt Lake City to go teach at the Utah State University campus down in Moab. They're trying to make a go of it, but they cannot afford housing, even though they're earning a lot of money. She's a college professor in the welding department. He's a professional welder. They can't get into housing in Moab, and we point out the major problems that are happening there, which are very similar to what happened in Park City, just pricing the working class out of the housing market. This is another sort of success story. If you know Rancho Markets, it's really, I think, probably the best most affordable, highest quality markets all over Utah. And we talk about their formula for success and how they're able to get such amazing produce for so inexpensive. And then don't become a cycling statistic. This is a story about texting and driving and how, unfortunately, the more pedestrian deaths, more cycling deaths are occurring because too many people are texting while they're driving, not paying attention. And yeah, it's just an awesome issue. This is one of my favorite stories by Dan Potts. There's an antelope herd right out by the Amazon Fulfillment Center off of I-215. And it's like one of the biggest herds of antelope in the western United States that is so close to a city. This is literally like 10 minutes out of downtown Salt Lake City. There's a giant herd of antelope, and it's located down by what's proposed to be the inland port and Amazon. So check it out, and we will take a little break, and we'll be back right after this.